All right, so I've decided to break this section up into little segments, and I'm going to continue where I left off in the first video. This will be part two to the, I guess, the different segments, and this one I'm going to focus on product rule examples and work these three problems out, and then in the next video I'll go over the quotient rule. All right, so the product rule. So from the last video, my product rule notation I use a derivative with respect to x, and it's u times v equals u prime v plus uv prime is the notation I use. Now for these examples, so for number 5, all right, so I'm going to let u be the 2x minus 3 portion, and I'll use the color green just to color coordinate this. And for the other ones, I will just not use color coordination just to save time. So I'm going to use u for the first factor, 2x minus 3, and then I'm going to use v for the 1 minus 5x. So I need to find u prime. Well, u prime is the derivative of 2x minus 3. And taking that derivative of 2x minus 3, that's going to be 2 times 1 plus 0, because the derivative of x is 1, and the derivative of 3 is 0, because that's a constant. So u prime is 2. Now for v is 1 minus 5x, so v prime, derivative of 1 is 0, and then derivative of negative 5x is negative 5 times 1, since the derivative of x is 1. So v prime's negative 5. So now I can use the product rule. So I'll write the general rule. All right, so I paused the video and wrote the general rule for the product rule. And this way I'm going to use the color coordination. So g prime of x according to the product rule, it's u prime. Well, u prime is 2, so it'll be 2 times v. Well, v is, I was letting that be 1 minus 5x. And then plus u times v prime. Well, u itself is the 2x minus 3. And then v prime is negative 5. All right, that's directly substituting it in from the formula. Now it's a matter of simplifying it. So I distribute 2, so that makes this 2 minus 10x. And then here I would distribute the negative 5. So that's going to make this negative 10x, and then the plus 15. Then I combine the negative 10x's together to get negative 20x. And then 2 and 15 make 17. So plus 17, and then that's going to be the answer. Again, so I let u be 2x minus 3, I let v be 1 minus 5x, u prime is 2, since that's the derivative of 2x minus 3, v prime is negative 5, since that's the derivative of 1 minus 5x. And then I plug them into their corresponding spots in the formula and simplified it, and I get the result of negative 20x plus 17. All right, so that's that one. The next one, number 9, x cubed times cosine x. So recall from previous section that the derivative of cosine is negative sine. All right, so I'm going to let u be the x cubed part. I'll let v be cosine x. So if I were to get u prime, the derivative of u, by power rule, that turns into 3x to the 3 minus 1, which is 3x squared. V is cosine x, so that means v prime is the derivative of cosine, that's negative sine, so it'd be negative sine x. All right, so I'm plugging in that for v prime, and then 3x squared for u prime. So our product rule. Okay, so I'll pause it and then write the general product rule. All right, so I wrote the product rule down. Now I'm going to apply it to this problem. So f prime of x u prime times v. Well, u prime is 3x squared. And v itself, well, I was letting v be cosine. And then plus u times v prime. U is x cubed. And then v prime is negative sine x. And I'm going to put that in parentheses. All right, so that's directly substituting it in. Now, what I would do is try to factor out a common factor, and the common factor that each term, 3x squared cosine x, and technically that's minus x cubed sine x, what they share in common is x squared. So f prime of x, if I factor out x squared, the first term turns into 3 cosine x. And then the second term turns into minus x sine x. All right, and then that's going to be the answer. All right, so that's that one. Now the next one. Next one's going to be is a little more involved, but these are kind of warm-up questions for this one, number 55. All right, so this one's more complicated. And you could go about this two ways. I could try to factor out a common variable x, and then apply the product rule in that fashion, or I could apply product rule to each component. So I'm going to factor out what they have in common, and what they have in common is x, but it's really not going to do is make it much easier, I guess. Let's see. Actually, I'll go ahead and do the product rule for each part. Okay, so I'm going to focus on each piece, and the first piece is 2x sine x. And so if I wanted to find the product, like the derivative of that with the product rule. Now the product rule, okay, so I'm just going to use green for the first term, 2x sine x, and use what its result is when I take its derivative is going to be in green. That way there's not so many different colors. So I'm going to let u is going to be the 2x part, and then v is going to be sine x. So u prime, the derivative of 2x is 2 times 1, which is 2. So u prime is 2. V is sine x. The derivative of sine is cosine. So v prime is cosine x. So if I were to take the derivative of 2x sine x, it's going to be u prime times v. U prime is 2. And v is sine x, so it'll be 2 sine x. And then plus u times v prime. U itself is 2x. And then v prime is cosine x. All right, this is just the derivative of the first term. I still need to find the derivative of the second term, the x squared cosine x. And I'll use that as in color purple. So the second term, x squared cosine x. All right, so for the x squared cosine x, I'm going to let u be x squared. So that means u prime, using the power rule, it becomes drop 2 down, so it's 2x to the 2 minus 1, which is just 2x. Now v is cosine x, and the derivative of cosine is negative sine. So v prime is negative sine x. So if I take the derivative of x squared cosine x, it's going to equal u prime times v. Well, u prime is 2x, and v is cosine x. And then plus u v prime. Well, u is x squared. And then v prime is negative sine x. So really this is 2x cosine x minus x squared sine x. And this is the derivative of the second term. right, so I'm going to combine all of this together and get the end result. Okay, so combining all this. So we get, and our original function was y, so it's going to be y prime. And it's the derivative of the first term plus the derivative of the second term. Right? Our first term was 2x sine x. I found its derivative. That's what's in green, 2 sine x plus 2x cosine x. The second term is x squared cosine x. That was what we got in purple. So the first term is 2 sine x plus 2x cosine x. All right, that takes care of the first term. Now I just latch on the derivative of the second term, which was 2x cosine x minus x squared sine x. All right, so I can combine 2x cosine x, the middle two terms, to make 4x cosine x. And then minus x squared sine x. Okay, let's see. So if I try to combine any terms or do any factoring, is there anything I can factor? And just based on here, I have a sine and a sine x right there. So I can factor out sine x for those two terms. And then I'll be left with 2 minus x squared. So that takes care of factoring out sine x from those two. And then I have plus 4x cosine x. Right, so that's going to be it. That's as far as I can go. Right, so y prime is sine x times parentheses 2 minus x squared, and then plus 4x cosine x. Now this is a preference thing as far as doing this factoring. So this would be what the textbook would want. Or you could have just left your answer as 2 sine x plus 4x cosine x minus x squared sine x. So either one is fine. All right, so this is the 3 examples I was going to do for product rule. The next video are going to be 3 examples using the quotient rule. And so for 55, I had to take each part, each term, and find its derivative. Since I have a product rule that I apply for the first term, product rule applied for the second term. So the first term, 2x sine x, when I found its derivative, using the product rule, I get the 2 sine x plus 2x cosine x. And then for the second term, x squared cosine x, I get its derivative as 2x cosine x minus x squared sine x. And then I just add the two together to get the overall derivative. So that's what is going on here. So what's in green was the result of the derivative of the first term. And then what's in purple is the result of the derivative of the second term. And then from there, it's just combining the cosine x terms together in the middle to make 4x cosine x. And then I just recognized that I had sine x with the 2 sine x term, and then the minus x squared sine x term. And I factor out sine x, so that's what's going on in gold. All right, so that's where I'll stop it. Next video, I'll go over the quotient rule.